Joining us again this week is parenting and relationship expert Chantal Bisson. Chantal, this time we're going to talk about how to protect your child when it comes to all the negative news that's out there, not even just in regular newscasts, but just social media in general. There's just so much of it now. Where do you even begin to try and filter what your children see?
Well, yeah, it's certainly tricky because it's coming at them from all angles. And I noticed even when our youngest was in elementary school, the curriculum had changed quite significantly. You know, there was a lot of talk about recycle, reduce, reuse. There were all sorts of adult initiatives being put on to young children who who definitely didn't have the psychological development to understand what all that meant. So I remember when that started to come into the education system, I thought, wow, I understand we need to teach them about these things, but we need to do it in a way that doesn't stress them out and doesn't freak them out and cause them to be anxious, because a teacher can only know so much about a child. A parent knows best about how much their child can take, and what would cause one child a tremendous amount of anxiety might just roll right off another one's back. So I think it goes back to knowing your child, knowing what they can and cannot handle, and then gauging from there. We had a rule where in our house we only had one television set, and it was in the family room, and it was not on the news. I've been to people's houses where they've got the news playing all day long, and I think that you've really got to limit the exposure that your child has to issues and topics that they don't know how to process. You know, that just goes in and sits and festers with them without any way to understand it and to process it.
Now, Chantal, where is the line when it comes to being a bit overprotective? Because obviously, as you said, each child is different. You know, older kids, maybe even late teens, would likely be interested in the news and what's happening in the world. But whereas some of the younger ones may see some images that they don't quite understand and may be harmful to actually, you know, how they function in life. So where do you find that line as to how much information you're giving them and if you are being too overprotective?
Yeah, I think that's a really tough question, and it's a good one and it's an important one. But for example, for me, I started writing my daily blog, and it was an opinion blog, and I started in 2016. And when I started it, it was about topics that were happening in the news in the moment. And what I started to realize after writing that blog for 2 years is I found like my spirit was getting really heavy, and I felt like I wasn't dealing with my own life very well. And I'm now a 49-year-old woman. And what I determined about myself is that I need to know about what's happening in the world, but not to the point where it starts to rob me of me feeling good in my own skin. And I think it's that simple. You know, you've got to really, really gauge what your child can handle and at what age. Everybody is different. And it's okay for a kid to not be interested in going into that dark place of the news of the world, knowing that they can't really do anything to change it. So I think it goes back to that good old fashioned rule, just like respect other people's limits.
Okay, thank you so much, Chantal. We're out of time for this hour. You can check out Chantal, chantalbisson.com, or at Chantal Bisson on Twitter and Instagram. And we'll be back next hour talking about putting your oxygen mask on first when it comes to relationships. We'll be back next hour. Chantal Bisson is back with us this hour, and this time we're going to be focusing on relationships. And Chantal, you talk about putting your oxygen mask on first, and what does that mean to you?
Well, to me, it means not losing your identity in your relationship and not becoming the other person. I mean, I don't know if you saw a few months ago, there was this joke meme going around of how Brad Pitt took on looking like exactly every woman he ever dated. And that's quite to the extreme, obviously, if you're going to actually physically start to look like your partner. But I think it's really, really important inside of a relationship to keep your own identity, keep your own interests, keep your own set of friends, and get your own alone time within the relationship. And to be sure that when something doesn't feel right, or is not fulfilling you in the relationship, not being afraid to vocalize that in a respectful way, to let your partner know that, hey, there's a problem here for me. I'm not feeling great right now. I'm not feeling like I'm flourishing in this relationship anymore. And can we work together to get back to the point where I feel like this relationship is mutually beneficial to me as it is to you?
Now, what can happen, and how quickly do you think things can kind of start to fall apart if you don't do this, and if you kind of ignore things until they get to a point where you've either kind of given up or stopped caring, or it's just like, well, I'm just going to go on in my day and whether I'm happy or not.
Yeah, well, again, I think it all bears on the tolerance for the person. Everybody's built differently and wired differently, and some people can be that camel a lot longer. It takes them a lot longer to become for the straw that breaks their back to appear. So I think it really depends on the relationship and what you feel like you're getting out of it. Because I know for me, inside my relationship with Yannick, there have been times where it's like so much of it is going really, really well, but there's that little nagging thing that's not working for me, and then you're hesitant to actually even bring it up because you feel like, am I making a mountain out of a molehill here? Because so much of the relationship is really, really thriving and beautiful and wonderful, but there's this one thing over here that's really not working for me, and is it really worth to bring it up? And when I do bring it up, is it going to be an explosion, or is there going to be a solution? So I think it's about knowing your own tipping point and not getting past that.
So what would you give as advice to someone who is in that exact situation that you just described, Chantel? If they don't quite know what the effects are going to be, should you push it, or kind of, I guess, weigh the temperature of the situation?
Well, depends on which day you get me on. Every day I'm just going to push it. And then I think, as I'm growing older and working more on myself, and I think that's really important in a relationship, is to take a step back when you are in upset, is to step back and be like, is this really about my partner, or is this me? Am I seeing this situation through my own lens, and am I reading it through my own story, or is this a reality? Like, is this really happening in real time, or am I conjuring it up through my own lens? And I think when you ask yourself those questions, you diffuse some of the fire and you diffuse some of the passion out of it, and then you can then go back to the situation in a day or two and address it in a calmer way that you're not going to have a huge blow up out of it, and you might end up with a very, very, very positive outcome for both parties.
All right, well, thank you, Chantel. And one thing I would like to mention is that when Chantel speaks to us here on the newscast, she also connects some articles with further information on this on her website. So please check out chantelbisson.com. And Chantel, we will see you again next week.
Great, I look forward to it.